So all
Good
you.
evening. Welcome to Cornerstone Home Inspector Education Center. Tonight we have part two of our Connecticut Law Seminar. I'm going to hand it right over to Stan. He'll get started, and then I'll kick in about a half hour, and we'll finish up with Scott. And then we have some announcements at the end. So we'll probably get done not too early, but we'll have a little bit of time to go over some stuff at the end. Take it away, Stan.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for attending part two. We're going to pick where we left off last night with insulation and ventilation inspection, section 249111. So insulation requirements per the SOPs of the state of Connecticut standards. Inspectors must examine insulation and vapor retarders in unfinished spaces such as attics, crawl spaces, and unfinished basements. They must also note the absence of insulation in unfinished spaces at conditioned surfaces, which could indicate energy efficiency issues. The assessment of the ventilation. The inspection must include an examination of ventilation in attics and foundation areas to ensure proper air circulation. Inadequate ventilation can lead to moisture problems, mold growth, and reduced insulation effectiveness. Mechanical ventilation. Inspectors must check mechanical ventilation systems throughout the home, including bathroom exhaust fans, kitchen range hoods, and whole house vent systems that help maintain indoor quality. While inspectors must document insulation types and ventilation systems, they are not required to disturb insulation or vapor barriers, which could damage these materials or release particles into the air. They also don't need to determine indoor air quality, which would require specialized testing and equipment. So just a note on, these are all kind of intertwined, especially insulation and ventilation. And in the 37 years that I've been doing this, I've seen an awful lot of older capes and ranches and colonials that just have gable vents. They may have ridge vents now, but they don't have soffit vents. And so they certainly don't meet today's standards, and they probably don't meet today's standards with insulation. So I do spend more time looking for the downside or the absence of mold, water droplets underneath the nails, rusted nails. Just because we're not venting the way we would today doesn't mean we're not venting adequately. So being aware of all that stuff, the presence and the absence, can help you assess the ventilation, at least in the attic. Same thing with the crawl space. We've changed our views on crawl spaces over the years. First, they had to be cross vented. Then they shouldn't be vented at all, just humidified. Now we're sealing them off. And, Jim has a horror story about a sealed basement or crawl space that had termite damage behind it. So we got to be on our toes when we're doing these things. But the minimum requirements for inspection and recording are listed right here. Next page, Jim. So if you're viewing this as a recorded webinar, you will need to pass on this number, CTSOP 2025, with the other numbers to get your certificate. These are all proof of viewing. Okay, Jim. So fireplaces and solid fuel burning appliances. System components. Inspectors must examine the components of fireplaces and solid fuel burning appliances, including fireboxes, dampers, and controls. These elements are critical for the safe operation of these heating sources. The venting systems. The inspector must include vent systems, flues, and chimneys associated with fireplaces and solid fuel burning appliances to ensure proper venting of combustion products. Documentation in a report. Inspectors must describe the fireplace, solid fuel burning appliances, and chimneys in their reports, noting the type, condition, and any significant deficiencies observed. So My report has a section for these things, and I'm sure with other reports, if you don't fill them in, that, or if they're not present, you just don't fill that section in. And then you can make sure that whatever the standards requires are in those sections, and then put anything else in there that you feel you want to report on. But that's the basic requirements. So home inspectors are not required to inspect the interiors of flues or chimneys that aren't readily accessible. They also do not need to examine fire screens, doors, seals, gaskets, automatic fuel feed devices, mantles, fireplace surrounds, combustion makeup, air devices, or heat distribution assist. Additionally, inspectors are not required to ignite or extinguish fires, determine draft characteristics, or move fireplace inserts, stoves, or firebox contents. We can tie this a little bit. I know I make a list of all the things. I have a summary in my report. I'm in that summary. I have items that could not be inspected. And a lot of times, if you have a gas fireplace and it's not on, I don't spend a whole lot of time trying to get that on. If directions on how to try and start it, I will give it a shot. If it doesn't start, if I run through those directions, I do not put any more time into it. I just write in my report that it could not be ignited and that they should have it functional, and the homeowner should have it operating for the final walkthrough. Just, if you're going to try and put time into all these things that may not be functional, even though we tried to turn it on with the homeowner's controls. One example, house had a wood burning a gas fireplace, and I asked the owner, he was home, to get it started, and I was wrapping up and he still couldn't get it going. He goes, "Oh, I had it on yesterday." So you minimize the time involved. If it doesn't start the first time, I would suggest just to write it up and have them have it repaired. So general limitations and exclusions of the home inspection. Inspection scope. Inspections are not technically exhaustive and do not identify concealed conditions or latent defects. That kind of goes back to what we were talking about yesterday. I think it was it Dave who had that disconnected ductwork that he just didn't find, and that's a concealed defect in my book. Was it William?
William. Yeah.
Yep. That's a concealed defect in my book. I don't care what kind of instruments you have to try and determine that. Random sampling, all those things kind of come into play here. And we're reiterating that at the end of the standards here by saying we don't have to identify concealed conditions or latent defects. Optional services, additional services beyond requirement may be offered as optional or at the client's request. So a lot of guys offer pool inspections. I know guys are getting into doing an evaluation of lawn sprinkler systems, sewer line scopes. There's a lot of things that you can add for whatever reason. You just want to be more thorough for your client, or you're trying to, make a few more bucks. But, my advice is, I've seen people fail because they don't do them enough. Over the 37 years that I've been in this business, where they fail at those extra add-ons because they just don't do them every inspection. So make sure you know what you're doing if you're adding those things to your list. So building types. Regulations apply to buildings with 4 or fewer dwelling units and attached garages. So anything more than 4 units, I believe, still is considered a commercial property. The standards don't apply to commercial. If I do commercial, I apply the standards anyways, just to keep that kind of base running through all my inspections. And required actions. Inspectors only perform actions specifically stated in regulations unless required by law. And also, when you have an agreement, and there are, believe it or not, still some guys out there that do not use an agreement, you can allow your clients to omit something as long as it's in writing, and then you have that stated in your agreement. Like if you're doing something for an electrician and he says, look, I don't want, you don't have to do the electrical, I wouldn't lower my price. I would just say the electrical was, the client asked to omit electrical from the inspection. Determinations outside the scope of the inspection. Home inspectors are not required to determine the condition of systems that aren't readily accessible, the remaining life of components, or the strength and adequacy of a system. They do not need to identify causes of deficiencies, recommend specific repair methods or cost, or predict future conditions. Inspectors also don't assess property suitability for specialized uses, market value, or purchase advisability. Additionally, they don't evaluate regulatory compliances, presence of hazardous substances, effectiveness of remediation systems, operating costs, acoustical properties, or warning equipment types. What kind of system may not be readily accessible out of the major building components? You know, in a hoarder's house, I guess maybe you can't get to the furnace or the electrical panel. So you would be stating that. The remaining life of components, I'm sure that we're all putting in a estimated useful life for, say, a furnace, and then by determining the age, you can kind of, without even saying it, people can have an idea of what the remaining life of that component is, but I would never term it that way because all that varies, and we all know that. The strength and adequacy of systems, you know, if there's a structural, an addition on a house and main girder sagging, we should just say that. We can't determine that girder isn't sized properly, but obviously it looks like it is. You always have somebody else come in and, if you're suspect of something, have somebody else come in and be more definitive. And then identifying causes of deficiencies and recommending repairs. You know, that's a slippery slope as well. And that's why the standards tell you that if you see something wrong, you don't think it's working right, you have somebody else come in and evaluate it, an expert in that field, and let them take the responsibility to tell somebody how to repair that. Okay, Jim. Professional limitations. So engineering services. Home inspectors are not required to perform engineering services or work in any other trade or professional service beyond home inspections. If you are an engineer, then you have the ability to go a little further. If you're an electrician, you're going to have a little bit more knowledge than somebody else. If you're a plumber, you're going to have a little bit more knowledge than some other home inspector. But I would still recommend staying within the guidelines of the standards. Inoperable systems. Inspectors do not need to operate systems that are shut down, inoperable, or do not respond to normal controls. I'm going to tell you a quick story. It just came up in July. I inspected a house in Southbury, and the boiler was off on reset. I don't reset them. This thing was a mess. The jacket was badly rusted. It was a cast iron boiler and manufactured in 2020. So I put that in my report. I told the girl. Now, a girl had a little bit of attention deficiency. Even when you were talking to her, you knew that she wasn't hearing everything. I told her, you got to have this serviced. You got to figure out why it's not working, what was leaking. The vent pipe was rusted, so we weren't drafting properly. It was in what I would consider a confined space. So I wrote all that up. She texted me 2 days ago and told me that the heating system zone on the basement isn't working right. She had a few people come in and they told her the boiler was a mess and that maybe it's not venting right, and she may need a fan in a can. And technically, they're all saying that you probably should have replaced this system. And I said, if you go back to your report, that's all in your report. And, I don't know what your work was with the realtor and trying to negotiate anything, but that was a significant defect and the biggest thing I found in the house. And that's the way I wrote it up. So just because you feel you wrote something up in the report, and even if that system was not operable, people don't read, people don't listen until something goes wrong after they move in. So that report is now a document that you couldn't operate that system. And I described its condition and the necessity to inspect that. Shutoff valves. Operating shutoff valves is not required, as these may be stiffer prone to leaking if rarely used. And we all know that. Scott had mentioned that, I think, yesterday about people getting out ahead of them and turning valves on, and then we're stuck with what happens later. So in that case, you got to control the inspection. You got to make sure these people aren't getting out ahead of you and turning things on and off. Dangerous areas. Inspectors aren't required to enter areas likely to be dangerous to themselves or others, or that might damage property or systems. Getting on a roof if you're not comfortable with it. Getting in a crawl space. I had to be pulled out by my feet because I got into a window well access, and once I got in there, it was all pneudocreted, and I couldn't turn around and I couldn't go forward. And luckily, the people didn't walk away, and they pulled me out by my feet. So now I try to look into every crawl space before I attempt to get in there. Go ahead, Jim.
Two things. First thing is, please leave your microphone off if you're not going to ask a question. Second thing is shutoff valves. I have just a little anecdote. I was doing an inspection and went to run the gas stove, and the knob to control the gas port for the stovetop just kept spinning around. So you couldn't shut it off. And we hear the gas going. So I'm like, that's not going to be a good thing. So I go to pull the stove out to shut the gas off behind the unit. The agent looks at me and goes, I don't feel comfortable with you shutting off the gas. You're not supposed to shut off, you do shutoffs and everything. And I said, well, I'm not comfortable with the house exploding when we leave because there's no way to shut the burner off now because the knob is broken. So, even though you're not required, there's going to be situations that you're going to have to do it. But it's a little funny story there. There you go. Ghosting.
So areas excluded from inspection, inaccessible spaces, underfloor crawl spaces or attics that are not readily accessible. Some may be accessible for one inspector and not for another. Whether it's due to the size of the inspector, the age of the inspector, some guys and gals can get to spaces that other guys and gals can't. Just document it. As Jim likes to say, document, document, document. Common areas, common elements in multi-unit housings like condominiums. A lot of guys don't do the outside of the condos either. I do. I treat it like a house. I may mention areas that have a direct common area that has a direct relationship to the specific unit, but other than that, I don't get into that much at all. Underground, unless it's the whole complex is poorly maintained, I'm going to make a recommendation or comments on that. Underground items, underground storage tanks or other buried components. That's why we need to look very hard in the basement. Anytime I look at the age of the house. If it's an older house and it's on gas right now, I look extra hard for evidence of burial oil tanks. Decorative elements, purely decorative items that don't affect functionality, and detached structures other than garages and carports. Now, detached garages, I think we all do as part of a home inspection, but I don't think they were mentioned any place in the standard of practice, detached garages. So to me, that's a little bit of a deficiency. Even though we do them, they're not mentioned any place in the standards. Operational limitations, moving items. Inspectors are not required to move items suspended, to move suspended ceiling tiles, personal property, furniture, equipment, plants, soil, snow, ice, or debris that might obstruct access to systems or components. When I first started, I would shovel a small walkway, and even if you shovel it, you still can't really tell what condition it's in. So I used to brush off some of the shingles to try and look at a roof. So I'm looking at 10 shingles on a roof that has who knows how many. I don't do that anymore, obviously. Dismantling. Home inspectors do not need to dismantle any system or component except as explicitly required by the regulations. This prevents potential damage to property, properly functioning systems. I put a cover on a blower compartment of a gas-fired furnace back on when I was finished, and I think most of us take those covers off, and I guess I didn't get it on right. So that switch that holds the blower motor out wasn't engaged, and they didn't have any heat that night, and it was the winter time. So I got a call, and I did go back there and put the cover back on right. I didn't know what it was until I got there. But even when there's a cover that you're supposed to take off, or you feel you could take off or should take off, make sure you put it back on properly. Specialized testing. Inspectors aren't required to perform specialized tests that would go beyond the scope of the visual inspection, such as pressure testing plumbing or load testing electrical systems. Like I stated yesterday, some people are going beyond the standards of practice, and we all have that opportunity. Just make sure you know what you're doing.
Stan,
Yep.
just one thing I want to add to, and if you remember Master Shield, a long time ago, they had actually a lawsuit, and it involves ceiling tiles, and in my personal opinion, if I know a lot of guys out here would say, oh, if you break them and this, that, and the other thing, I've been doing this a long time, and I know the hot spots for termite activity, or obviously behind the front steps, other areas of the house. So if I can lift those tiles up without if I can't get them up carefully and they don't lift up, I'll look, and a lot of times I'll see stuff. And it's, you guys can choose how you do it. You don't have to do it. But me personally, basing it on what Master Shield had told me, that they got in trouble, there was a lawsuit, and they said those tiles are meant to be there so you can access electrical, wiring, plumbing, et cetera, et cetera. But, for us, it's in the standards. You don't have to do it, but I just caution you, if you can, and you can take a peek. Now, somebody could say, well, you peeked there, but you didn't do over there. Hey, at least I tried, Your Honor. You know what? I did the best I could. I was able to get those couple tiles just to look. Sometimes you can pop one up and look all the way around. You see a bunch of wiring. Sometimes you'll see staining, and we've all lifted up that tile, and there's a pipe and a shutoff valve that's leaking. So, and going back to moving items, I sometimes you get in a raised ranch underneath to see the shutoff, the water main, or just to get underneath there, or in other areas. Sometimes it might be just one tote or something, and if the agent wants to move it, or it's just me, I know everybody's worried that if you move something, you break it, you own it. If I'm careful, I try to get it out of the way to get under there. And again, you find stuff, termite, you find other things that maybe you wouldn't find, and yes, you can write it up that it was blocked by stored items, etc. However you want to do it, just if you can do it. Listen, I've been doing this since 2003, and nothing's come back to bite me yet. So that's just something I wanted to add. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that a little bit with the finished basements, especially, there was an inspector who noted that the basement was finished with installed wall, ceiling, and flooring material, which limited his inspection. I don't know the exact circumstances of why the people got into the ceiling, but there was an issue. And even though he said that in the report, he documented it, and he had pictures, but all you saw was a finished basement and furniture. It did go to court, and the judge said, well, you should have told the people in your report what possibly could have been concealed that you couldn't find. Well, to a certain extent, the sky's the limit. So I changed my report when I heard this story, and I put in that possible defects that may be concealed, could be electrical, mold. I forgot the exact words because I just click on it now, but so I give them a list of things that could exist behind that. Not every single scenario, but so my point is, even when you cover your butt, these are just hurdles. The limitations, the standards are there to help us, but you know, a bulldog attorney will try to jump all those hurdles, and that's why you document. Throw as many hurdles in there as you can. So, code of ethics, professional integrity. What are ethics? So they're a set of moral principles, a theory or system of morals, an old-fashioned work ethic. Everybody has personal ethics in their life, for work, for home, for whatever. We all have a certain constitution that makes us do things, you know, the best that we can. Most of us do. Out of all the trades and professions, I think home inspectors have the greatest opportunity to be unethical. So we're going to talk about a couple things that you do to try and maintain your ethics. So honest opinions, you based solely on education, experience, and honest convictions. That's what you're going to report on when you perform your home inspection. Good faith, always act in good faith towards each client. Confidentiality, maintain client confidentiality except when public safety requires disclosure. The Code of Ethics establishes professional standards for home inspectors, ensuring that they maintain integrity in their practice. Inspectors must form opinions based only on their education, experience, honest convictions, never allowing external factors to influence their assessment. They must always act in good faith towards clients, providing honest and thorough evaluation. Client confidentiality must be maintained, with inspection results disclosed only when with client approval, unless public health, safety, or welfare imperatively requires emergency action.
Stan, do you remember that commercial building you helped me on that
Yes.
had the medical center X-ray, that big lead shield, and the floor above it was deflecting? They had an engineer in there. They said that the floor could collapse. It was imminent, and there were people downstairs moving the big X-ray machine around. And I said, holy geez, you know, these people shouldn't even be in there. And at that point, this was many years ago, I had notified the building department, and they shut it down and supported it so it wouldn't have collapsed. Now, I had attorney, you know, my client's attorney, the other attorneys, you know, it's right in the standards, you know, I mean, and then we had another situation when I was, you know, I got to say, Stan, you trained me, been doing it a long time. You did a good job. But we had that one where you leaned against the water heater. Remember in the house?
Oh, yeah.
and the tenant on the second floor with her and her son, I believe they were sleeping with the windows wide open. Yeah. And they were sleeping with the windows wide open. So the flue was clogged all the way up to the water heater, and all that carbon monoxide was entering the home. And they had been sleeping, you know, with their windows open because they were feeling lightheaded and dizzy. So that was something that we had notified, and next, you know, Steve will appreciate this. The fire department showed up. There were issues. They got the people out of there. I think they put them in a hotel, and they made the homeowner fix, you know, clean the chimney, reline it, whatever they had to do. So that was probably two situations I had in my career, both with Stan.
Some people weren't happy, but
hey, did the right thing.
The family was safe. That's all that counted. All right, Jim, next page. So conflicts of interest. So one way that a conflict can occur is if you take compensation for referrals to make sure a house passes inspection, so to speak. You know, that's definitely a conflict of interest because you're not providing your clients with a clear understanding of the home. You go soft on things, you know, and let's face it, a big thing for one person could be a small thing for another. Somebody else may be panicking because the doorknob is loose, but you just need to disclose the things in the proper fashion and not cover things up or pat them down to get another inspection. And if money's involved, that's a big no-no. Same thing with commissions.
So, on compensation, when you do a home inspection and your client is Lisa Smith, and Lisa Smith's dad's there, and he wants to be a hero and he pulls out his checkbook or credit card to pay you, Lisa didn't get a home inspection. The contract has not been fulfilled if the party on the agreement did not pay for the inspection. So just be aware of that. It's not, if you go into ethics, you need to disclose that to your client and say, listen, just FYI, your dad's paying for this. You didn't pay for it, so it's really not a completed contract. That's all.
So disclosure. Many, many years ago, I walked up. Most of the time I get there early, but I walked up to the front door of this house with my clients and the realtor, and the owner opens the door and he goes, "Hey, Stan, how you doing?" Well, that's not a really good thing. Somebody I used to work with like 15 years ago, and the look on the people's face was like, "Oh, here we go." He knows them. So I had to disclose the fact that we worked together 15 years ago. We probably haven't, I don't think I ever saw the guy between those 15 years. And when all was said and done, everybody was okay, and we proceeded and did the home inspection. They could have said, "You know what, I'm not comfortable with this," and we could have canceled and they could have rescheduled. It was back in the day where that wouldn't have been a huge deal. But and then the other thing, and I think Scott could talk about this as well, for 20 years I did radon reduction up until 2019, and I got to be well known around the area here. So if I tested a house during a home inspection that came back with a high level of radon, the realtors would pass my name to the owner. And we're not supposed to work in houses that we've performed home inspections, or at least try and solicit work from those houses. That's a conflict of interest, because we can say something's wrong and it's not, and we can go in and do the work. So again, everybody's on board. I didn't have a problem doing the radon reduction. But if somebody said, "I'm not comfortable with that," retest or don't hire me. I didn't solicit that work. My name was recommended. So probably in retrospect, you want to stay away from that. But just do your home inspection and whatever other services you sold. And quality assurance. Never allow business interests to affect the inspection quality. If you know somebody else that wanted to buy that house, you could trash it, and then these people move in and walk in and try and buy it after the other people walk. So you probably very rarely do these things happen, but they have happened. In 37 years, I've seen some things go on. I've had people tell me, "Hey, look, take it easy on this house. Don't go crazy." And, then I'm going to go even harder.
Stan, do you disclose if you've inspected a house prior, like the previous month or 6 months? That's happened to me quite a few times, where I'll go back and, a month later, the house
completely renovated.
Well, no,
I go both ways,
So for instance, I had a house in Monroe, and believe it or not, I got 4 times on the same house. And there was a defect in the house. The bearing wall in between the garage and the house, you could push it. I would actually move it. It was cinder block. I called it out the first time. Then I get a call the second time for another buyer, because the first buyer walked away. And that happened 2 more times. Each time I disclosed prior to the inspection, "I've inspected this house and there's a significant issue. Here's the issue." And they went ahead with it anyways. So what do you think, Stan or Scott? What do you think on that? Like,
I had houses that were bought and they renovated it, and it's like, wow, you walk in and it's totally different. They did a great job. And I've had houses where, again, like maybe a year later, the person still owned it that I did the previous did the previous inspection for. But I told my client, I said, if you're uncomfortable with it, they were my client before, let me know now. And, I could certainly get somebody else, and other colleagues of mine and they're like, no, go, we trust you. And I've had that happen throughout the years.
Yeah, something here.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, what we do is we have them sign a piece of paper before we do the inspection. We have them sign a piece of paper that says that we're going to be able to release the information to the realtor, but it also says that if they decide not to go forward, that we have the right to re-inspect that house as long as they are not going forward with the deal. And that's worked out really well for us because I'm in this business 43 years. I've inspected the same house years later. And, sometimes I walk into these houses, I have no memory of being there. And yet I'll find my card in the panel box. The house has been renovated or it's been changed or it may be the same and I just don't remember it. But I think that once you discover that you've been there before, you better tell the client that you've been there before.
Right. I agree. And especially with not remembering, you can't remember every house you did. And I'm sure there were houses that I did a second time, but there was a space between them. I think Jim's talking about doing that one like 3-4 times within a small period of time, right, Jim?
And here's a good question that we just got asked by Charlie. I didn't think your licensing could disclose a problem with the property to someone other than the client that paid for the inspection if you inspected it before. So what she's saying is, can I release any information about that house to anybody else? Well, probably the answer is no. However, then you go into your ethics. I had to disclose that I've done the house before, and is it ethical to hide a significant issue? That's really, it's not a miswired outlet, it's not a leaky faucet, it's a structural wall that's holding up the house. Like, it's a pretty big deal. So, I get it. I don't know if any lawyer or judge would have a problem with
you. You know that, Jim, at that point when you're disclosing it, you're telling them before you start the inspection, right? Yeah. So you may or may not know if the wall, in your case it wasn't, but that wall may have been repaired, and
right.
then
that's true too. And then as for getting permission, the only from past clients, if the house falls through, the only thing I've ever run into, I think Steve makes a great point by, having that in your paperwork that, you have the right or permission to do it if the deal falls through. The only thing I owe to my past clients is not to release that report. Right. If they pass on that house, that report stays with me on my Google Drive, period. If they request it, they can have it. If they give me permission, I'll give it to somebody. I also have disclaimers of third-party interest in my software that basically tells anybody if they're seeing this report and they're not supposed to have it, that's in violation, of the law. They're not supposed to have that report. But I've never run into an instance where the deal fell apart and I go back and re-inspect the house and my previous buyers are going, hey, we don't want you inspecting that house. Usually they're going to hire me or you for the next inspection anyways. But that's a really good question. Like, you're not supposed to disclose anything, but I would have a real big problem if I was going to book with an inspector and he's done the house, he knows there's a significant issue, and I'm throwing away $500 or $600 when he, at that point, I just disagree.
Well, you can, like I said, you may go in there and many times it might have been, because they walked, they may have fixed it. And a lot of times people walk and then they and then 6 months later, the price is reduced or they make repairs, on the big stuff, not the little stuff. There's another.
But Scott, but I don't know that.
No, you don't. You don't.
So would you, Scott, let me ask you a question. Would you disclose that there was a significant issue?
I could tell them there was some, listen, there's some problems. You want me to keep going? I mean, that could be repaired.
Right.
I inspected this house before and we don't know till we get in there. If we walk in there and the same wall is leaning and all that, then I'm going to see it anyways. And I don't know how other people do business. Maybe, you know, a lot of people tell me, oh, just get the money. There have been times you walk into that house, and Steve Gladstone's been doing this a long time. Stan's been doing it longer than me. You walk in the house and there's big, big issues right off the bat. And it's a young couple with a little baby. And sometimes I'll tell them up front. And you know, I don't necessarily know, we're not supposed to say, don't buy it. I say, this is a big issue. Mold and structural issues as far as termite, you know, an old farmhouse and stuff. So, you know, I always try to do what's right. And you know what? I've been doing this since 2003, and you know, it goes back to integrity and honesty. And if you do what's right and you do the best job for your clients, I'm not saying be an alarmist, jump up and down. There's a solution for everything. And you know what? If you make a mistake, I'm sure we all make mistakes. It happens, you know, and most people are a little more forgiving if they know that you're looking out for their best interest. If you're one of these guys that we call the breeze, and I'm not disrespecting anybody, they're in and out like the breeze. I mean, you know, my inspector, he takes him an hour. I go, well, I said, I could write, Stan and I used to have this argument all the time. If we just followed the standards, just didn't do anything more, it's still a minimum of a couple hours on an average size house, maybe 2.5. So, and you know, that's a tough one. And the other person had just said a quick question. Do I tell my clients that there's been obviously work and renovations, kitchens, basements, bathrooms, to check with the local building department? Stan does it. I'm sure you do it as well, Jim. To make sure that, and 9 out of 10 times, no permits. I just dealt with a house now, no permits. In-law apartment, kitchen wall, load-bearing wall taken out, and they just put 2x4s up to the rafter. I mean, it was a mess. But you know, the answer is I do have stuff in my report, and I mention it to them.
So, because we couldn't do the agreement portion that we used to do in litigation and stuff like that, we are going to try and have a special edition webinar with an attorney that would do the parts that we used to do for us, because honestly, a lot of guys and gals really came for that, basically, because pretty much you know the standards if you've been in business for any length of time. So we're going to try and do that again, and this is a great question to have the attorney talk about. So we'll let everybody know when we put that webinar together. We'll try to get it approved for credit. I don't know. We'll try, but if not, we'll just have a special seminar and see if any webinar and see if anybody's interested. So because there's a lot of things going on, especially with gyms, where he already knows what's wrong. If he told them before he went, maybe they would have said, okay, forget it, we don't want that house.
Right.
If the other people are gone out of the picture, I don't think there's an issue with Jim going back. What I tell people is, look, I've done the house. There are a couple issues there. You want to go forward and find out what they are? They're, you know, repairable, then let's go and do it. The other thing is, if we're getting halfway through and I could tell that they're disengaging and that their little smiles turn to frowns, I may give them the opportunity to, you know, pay me for the site visit and write up a one-page report and let them out of the rest of the deal.
Cool.
Yeah,
Do you want to
what I'll
continue
do
on,
is
or-
I'll actually call the previous client and say, are you pursuing this house anymore? And if they say no, then I don't have a problem with re-inspecting it
Exactly.
a week later.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, a lot of times, you know, because you probably did another home inspection from already. So, but
let me just tell you one thing in regard to your point about classes. Both Mark Champagne and I are now on the board, and we're looking at those classes that have been submitted and classes that have been rejected. And we're not particularly thrilled with the way the system has been going. So you may get that approved.
Agreed.
okay.
I agreed, Steve. We've been doing it since Kent. If you remember, Kent was, well, he's not our guy anymore, but you know, the guys liked it. I mean, they talked about, and especially for the newer guys that are just getting in the business, it was nice to have that attorney come in and talk about your contracts and litigation and different things you could do to protect yourself and stuff. You know, insurance, no insurance. So they told us we can't do it. And I still had said to Stan and Jim that I still think we should do something, even if we don't get the credits for it. But if you have a little pull up there and can get that, that would be something that we'd love to see.
Well, I can't tell you for sure that that's going to get approved, but a lot of things have been rejected recently because only one person on the board was evaluating them.
Yeah.
Right.
And and he's no longer on the board.
Yeah. Stan, do you want to continue on code of
Sure.
ethics?
So we'll put something together and submit it and see where it goes. Uphold the profession. So I think that everything any home inspector does is a reflection on our profession, right? There's the good, the bad, and the ugly in every profession. We all want to try and be the good. So we want to make every effort to uphold, maintain, and improve the professional integrity, reputation, and practice of the home inspection profession. And listen, over the years, I had people come to me and tell me about what they thought a home inspector missed or didn't do or should have done. And I'm going, look, unless I was there, I can't tell you, even if I read the report, I can't tell you what the condition of that house was. Was there furniture in the way at that particular? It's not fair to go behind somebody unless you know all the details. But I think it's really important for us to uphold our profession.
Contractors that'll come in and say, well, this wasn't the code. Your inspector should have found that or said something about that. And it was nothing wrong with it. It wasn't an unsafe issue, but that's the other thing that you run into. People think
some of that is payback for us picking on their work,
That may be true.
Honest advertising. Avoid false or misleading advertising or misrepresentation of any matters to the public regarding home inspection services. You want to be as honest as you can. If you put your pricing in there, if you have a pricing list, make sure they know that if there's an add-on, that they're add-ons. Don't let them think that the home inspection includes radon. Don't mislead them in any way. If you're an intern and you have an ad, you got to have your intern license on there. A license should be on there, whether you're a full licensed home inspector or an intern. If you have an advertisement without a license number, probably nobody's going to find out, but that's a little misleading as well. So, if there was some oversight somehow on that, that's what would be required, and you can get in trouble for not doing that. No appraisals. Never express an appraisal or opinion of the market value of the inspected property within the context of an inspection. I don't know if anybody would ever do that. You could, I guess outside chance somebody could say, this house ain't worth it, but they'd never be able to put a price tag on a house. So, but stick to the home inspection and your findings and you'll be fine. Non-discrimination. Never discriminate against anyone on the basis of age, creed, color, sex, sexual orientation, physical or mental handicap, or national origin. I think that's pretty cut and dry. It doesn't need to be explained. Okay, Jim.
Well, one thing on the no appraisals, that's something that I get asked a lot. Do you think the house is worth this much? And that's where a good agent comes in. And, I've worked with agents for a long time, some of them, and there's some I cut loose. And it's just because they just sit in their car or they're just not helping. They're not helping with the client. I don't need them for the inspection. Obviously, I don't want them, follow me around doing an inspection, but the agent should be following you around, taking notes, and be there for when the client says, hey, do you think this is worth $250,000, whatever it is. You can look to them and say, that's something that your agent would handle. I'm the home inspector. And you'd be surprised the amount of stuff that you could push off on an agent that just gets you just concentrating on the home inspection. But people will ask you crazy things. My agent's getting too much commission. What's my house worth, my contract, that's just going to delay the inspection, and it's stuff that you just don't want to get involved in.
Would you let your daughter buy this house?
All the time.
Or would you buy this house? Well, let's see. That would be number 9,580. But over time, you develop a technique to get out of that without looking like an idiot. Because you get asked a lot. And the parents, unfortunately, and it's all good intentions, but they definitely can muddy the waters. Look at that nail pop. Oh, there's nail pops. And, the kids don't even want them there half the time. And you know what? I'm seeing less and less of that anyways now. Before, when I first started, it used to be a lot. I would look out the window because the uncle and aunt and the dog would be there. And I said, where's the bus? But I think it's because my personal experience lately is that the first time buyers are a little bit older now than when I first started. They were in their 20s when I started in 89, and now they're 30s and 40s. So they don't bring their parents anymore.
They'll be 90 when their mortgage is complete.
So
but they still don't know anything. That's the whole
it's
thing.
worse.
They know
It's worse
nothing.
than ever now. Like that girl with the boiler. She didn't pay attention to anything that she was going to buy that house no matter what. And you could tell that she was not absorbing any of the information. So the report's not going to be read or not read properly. And that I can read people very well, and I knew that was going to be problematic. There were a bunch of issues afterwards, but it was other things that she had questions on that had nothing to do with the home inspection. That was an association, so a lot of stuff in the yard, the swings for the kids and the hot tub weren't even supposed to be there. She found out on the day of the closing. It was just a big mess because she wanted to buy the house so bad, she dismissed everything else. But we're going to move on. So here's a background scenario. A home inspector is hired by a first-time home buyer to perform an inspection on a single-family house. During the inspection, the inspector notices significant cracks in the foundation wall. These cracks may require major repairs. The issue: the inspector has a close business relationship with a local foundation repair company contractor. In fact, the contractor regularly refers clients to this inspector, and in return, the inspector refers work back to the contractor. The ethical dilemma: should the inspector recommend this contractor directly to the client? Is this a conflict of interest if the inspector has a financial or a referral arrangement with the contractor? And what does the Connecticut Code of Ethics require? So I think a lot of people refer people that they feel will do a good job. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to get referrals back, but if you are referring somebody on a regular basis, you're probably going to get referrals back from those people when they can. In my opinion, if they're legit and there's no money involved and there's no written, like there was no verbal say, I'm going to do this, you do that, we're going to be good. It's going to be hard to call that a conflict of interest, but here's what the rest of the scenario goes like. So, correct course of action. The inspector must disclose any financial interest or relationship with the contractor to the client. The inspector should provide at least 3 qualified contractors or recommend that the client independently seek out other contractors for further evaluation. And those aren't hard to do, those 2 things. The inspector must remain impartial and avoid even the appearance of steering the client towards a business relationship that benefits the inspector personally. Why this matters: failure to disclose could be considered unprofessional conduct or a conflict of interest leading to disciplinary action by the Department of Consumer Protection. The client may lose trust and the inspector's reputation could be harmed. But on the other hand, I have, for years and years and years, I used to, when you're talking to realtors, they'll tell you, oh, we have to, by law, refer 3 home inspectors. Okay. You know what they do, though? They'll put the guy they really want there on the top of the list, and they'll steer somewhat towards them. So it's done all the time. And I think there's a value if you're really trying to get these people, somebody to do the job right or who can do the job right. Maybe you need to find 1 or 2 more of those people so that everybody's legit, everybody's on board, and they get to pick a good contractor out of 3. It's not going to bite you in the ass all the time, but I think in our business, we need to minimize the potential for liability as much as we can. I feel that way. So sometimes it's a little difficult. You want to do the right thing, but it is a little bit out of our purview, referring contractors. But then they can get burned really fast too.
Here's the other thing too, is if they need something for negotiation purposes, let's just use the big guy that has been great to the inspection industry as a whole is Larry Janeski, Basement Systems. That guy does everything, right? A reputable company. And then there's two other companies out there, but they don't call back. They're out of business. So, you know, sometimes, I've been doing it. There's a lot of good guys I know, I work with, I tell them just do a good job. I don't want any money. Just, I don't get referrals for it. I mean, I'm sure other people do. I don't. Just do a good job by my clients. And it's hard to get contractors. No different I'm a radon mitigator. Um, you know, I can talk to somebody over the phone, get a pretty good idea how much it's going to cost. Some houses are pretty straightforward. Others you have to look at, but it's very hard to get guys out there because they know they're going to get credit and they're never going to hear from them again. So, if you're lucky to get those three guys to come out, we're talking big stuff, not little stuff. Sometimes they ask, do you know anybody? And you can give them three, but you'd be lucky if you get one out there. So, I totally agree with what the ethics are and everything, but ultimately I'm trying to help my client, and they do look to us. Steve, Stan, all the guys have been doing it a long time. They look to us. It's pretty funny. They look to us for our advice and our opinions on stuff. And a lot of these people, to Steve's point, they're 40 years old, 30 years old. They've never picked up a paintbrush or a hammer, or they don't do anything. So, trying to help them out. I'm not just stop at the inspection. I always tell everybody, if you get that phone call a year later and you're like, your heart stops, like, oh shit, what did I do? And you find out, hey, I remember you said you had somebody for this, that, and the other thing. And I was just wondering, what kind of insulation should I use in the attic? So those are the kind of things I believe in, having that relationship. And I think that goes a long way. And people appreciate that. And it's just the way I operate. But, I'm not inspection done and don't ever call me again. And sometimes you get the calls all the time, but I'm okay with that.
To add to that, because that's a good point. When I first got in this business, the market was, I would say, either a level market or more in favor of the buyer. And the realtors, let's just say I did an inspection and the boiler needed service and I don't know, fence needed repair or whatever, I don't know, they would get contractors there to get a price, because we used to be able to negotiate back then. And then the contractors started to realize that they weren't getting an opportunity to get work. They were just there for a number. So they either, when they saw, if they were driving to a house and they saw a real estate sign there, they would either drive by and not show up, or started charging for the number and say, I'll take it off the top if I get the job. Now it's hard to get anybody to come in and give a price. So if you're giving somebody a legit contractor who will at least show up, I don't think that's a really bad thing, but still, you got to be careful. Everybody's going to do what they feel, comfortable doing. Right. Jim, you want to jump in with education, since you're the
I'll comment. We had a good comment here that from David Farrington, that he had a realtor tell him that they wanted some money to get him on their list, and he wasn't too happy about that. I know I think it's William Ravis got sued several years ago because they had a book that they were selling like $5,000 that you can get your name on a list, and then the office had to,
they preferred inspector for that office.
Yeah,
you have to use the guy. Yeah.
So they had to stop that. All right, licensing, education, school requirements, formal filing. Each school, institution, or organization wanting to offer approved home inspection courses must submit formal filing for each course to the Home Inspection Licensing Board. This ensures all educational programs meet the necessary standards for quality and content. I can comment on this because this is what I do. This has become extremely challenging. We're in Connecticut, but we're also in 4 other states. So it's Connecticut. When I was with the other organization, you could just fill out one form. You could just tell them, we're going to do water heaters. And they would be like, okay, good for you, approved. Now they want to know a lot of information. They want an outline of what's going to be talked about. It's got to be broken down by specific time. They want to know how it relates to the state standard. They just don't want the code. They want you to pull out the state standard on how that information that you're going to be supplying continuing education relates to the state standard. And it better, because it won't be approved otherwise. I shouldn't say that. They will, if you have a course that's not in the state standards, let's say swimming pools, and we want to offer something on swimming pools, we can do that. You also have to have a paragraph in there on what the home inspector is going to take out of it. So the state's looking, which is a good thing. Public availability. Educational providers must offer to the general public at least one course required to meet the minimum qualifications for licensing. This ensures accessibility to required education for all prospective home inspectors. I don't know even what that means. And no one's ever called me from the public wanting to take a home inspection course. Principles and practices. A core requirement is a home inspection principles and practices course consisting of not less than 40 hours of classroom study. This comprehensive course forms the foundation for a home inspection education. That's basically the 40-hour course that they have to take from, to meet that first requirement as an intern, become an intern. Course filing requirements continue. Course materials. We must submit detailed course outlines like I talked about, and structure lecture guidelines, text and teaching materials, final examination quizzes, and grading systems. So all that has to be reviewed. Administrative documentation filings must include copies of completed certificates, proposed advertising, publicity materials, information on instructor training and classroom locations. So basically, we have to give them a copy of the certificate. We have to tell them how we're going to be training. Is it in person? Is it online? How long it's going to be? What it's going to be? Financial information, the dollar amount of tuition and other related costs must be disclosed to ensure transparency for prospective students, to allow the board to evaluate the program's accessibility. So we have to tell them how much we're charging. Additional requirements include minimum course length of 1 hour. And we felt when we started this that because it's a webinar, it's hard to get people to sit and listen for 2-3 hours. So we feel the 1 hour segments cover a lot of information. If it's too much information, we'll break that into, part 1, part 2. With correspondence courses permitted for continuing education, but not for pre-licensing requirements. Schools must submit updated course filings containing any changes within each 2-year period from the original approval date to maintain their approved status. What makes us different than every single other company offering education to home inspectors is Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey allow us to record these events, and then you can earn credit after the fact. So if you're a Connecticut inspector and you miss this 2-day law seminar, you can purchase it from us, become a member, however you want to do it, and earn your credits later. Massachusetts inspectors do not get that. They will not allow their inspectors to earn credit that way. Intern training program. The board-approved home inspection intern training program requires a minimum of 40 hours of instructional covering essential aspects of the profession. This structured approach ensures interns receive comprehensive preparation. So if you've ever taken the online course, which I did many, many years ago, it really doesn't teach you anything. It will show you terminology. It will get you sort of your feet wet into the home inspection industry. But I tell people that I train, you're only going to learn out in the field. You can read all the books that you want until you're out, in the attic and it's 150 degrees. You don't know what you're doing. General home inspection. Training includes fundamental inspection techniques, methodologies, and best practices for evaluating residential properties. This forms the core of an intern's practical knowledge. I think this gets into how intern programs work, but I make my interns, they have to do 100 supervised inspections. I'm skipping ahead a little bit. The state of Connecticut requires that only 10 of those be directly supervised, and then you have to have the next 90 reports read before they can be sent to the client. And we'll get further into that. I can tell you, I do train interns, but I make them do all 100 inspections with me, if not more. Connecticut laws and regulations. Inspectors must study Connecticut home inspection license law and regulations to ensure compliance with the state requirement and standard of practice. Again, I tell my interns, especially the first 5 years, read the standards of practice twice a year. Just do it. It's boring, but it really will help you. Specialized area. The program covers specialized area of home inspection practices and business law, preparing interns for the various aspects of the professional practice.
Jim, just to add to that, it's unfortunate that interns, I think they would benefit from, a lot of them do come to continue education seminars and stuff, and a lot don't. So back when I started, they didn't have to. They did, but they weren't required. And you get to learn a lot from other people, and you get to learn a lot from each one of these presentations that you go to.
Right. No, exactly.
I was told before we left Kahi that by a state board member that they were planning on having interns required to get continuing ed as well. I don't know if that's changed, but
well, I tell my interns,
Stan.
on that fact, just to let you know, because I download the lists for many different reasons. There are only 30 interns in the state of Connecticut. And that is down from like 80 or 90 usually. I've been tracking this for about 16 years now because that's what I do. And there's around 579 inspectors that are licensed in the state. And that's well down from over 900. So the profession is shrinking.
Steve has something to say about the intern training.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Well, who told you that they were going to require interns to go for continuing?
Do I have to tell you?
Privately.
The last guy in
Larry
Willett.
Yeah.
He said that they were talking about having interns get continuing ed. I think that's a good idea myself.
I do too.
But I didn't hear anything after that, so.
Yeah, well, I would say, if an intern supervisor has any brains, he would tell them to go to meetings of Kahi or to ASHE meetings and any continuing ed.
Yes.
Everything helps.
Agreed.
But
then you have
are they required or not?
You have the forever interns. I hope there's nobody on here that there was you could be an intern forever.
That's done though.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Finally.
Okay, so truthful claims. All advertising and statements, whether written or oral, must avoid exaggerated or unprovable claims, misrepresentation when discussing potential economic futures in home inspection. No misleading or deceptive claims are permitted. That's a conversation. I've spoken to Stan quite a bit about this. Is that when I was with Kahi, I was one of the members more north of where they would have their meetings, being in Cromwell. And no one was training up here. And I was asked to start training. And I wasn't really comfortable with it because I was sort of new in the profession. And so a couple of years in, I'm like 5, 6, 7 years in, I felt more comfortable. And I started taking on interns. And what I get now is people calling up, go, hey, listen, I took the course, 40 hours. Now you need to train me. And I'm like, well, there's a cost for that. Well, no one said anything about that. So, I charge, most of the supervisors charge, to train these people, or, that's how it works in the state, which is a little backwards. And I've had people tell me, you mean I'm an intern and I have to pay you to be an intern? I was well, no, you have to pay me.
An electrician or a plumber. They think they're doing an internship and you're paying them to work for you. And that's not the case. And a lot of them say, hey, I'm looking to get out of my job now. And this looks like it's something I should get into. I hear you can make a lot of money. And, when I first started, the business, there was a lot more homes for sale, and it's certainly, it's not that way anymore. And I think a lot of guys, going back to your point, a lot of guys have retired. There's a lot of guys that I remember from CAHI, being on the CAHI board for many years. A lot of guys are retired, guys have moved, and you're not seeing a whole bunch of, like, to your point, 30 people, 30 interns. And of those 30 interns, you probably have how many end up becoming licensed inspectors, because you have to get that 100. And I'm like you, Jim, 100 supervised is my opinion. I think 10 is, that's a lot of liability to send somebody out. And I don't, you're responsible, and you want to make sure that they're doing the right thing by the person.
Well, that's the other thing. By having them, I make them all come out with all 100, and there's no liability at that point, except for me. Approved wording: schools, institutions, or organizations are prohibited from using word approved by the Home Inspection Licensing Board, or similar phrasing in their advertising. This prevents implying official endorsements beyond meeting minimum requirements. I don't even know. I think we don't put anything. We just accept it or something. Approved. It's all our
We
courses
have their
are
approval number on the,
yeah. They give an approval number, and we have that on our site. Permitted language: educational providers may use the phrase "this course meets the minimum requirements as set forth by the Home Inspection Licensing Board" to accurately represent their compliance with standards without suggesting special approval. If you're watching this as a pre-recorded event, your viewing code is PT2ST2025. For something. Okay, pre-licensing course completion requirements. So we've talked about some of this, and we got about 15-20 minutes left. So we're going to go through this. 40 hours. They must take that pre-licensing course. They have to get a 70% grade and 100% documentation. School must issue a completion affidavits with the attendance dates and their final grade. We don't participate in this. We're just continuing education. So I'm not going to read that, because this is just not really what we're talking about. Course and location approval process. Advanced notifications. Schools must submit course schedules at least 10 days before the first session, including dates, hours, locations, tuition fees, advertising, and instructors. Prior approval. No courses can commence or be advertised as approved without prior written approval from the Home Inspection Licensing Board. Change notification: any changes in approved courses or instructional staff require prior written notification or approval from the board. Facility requirements: that doesn't apply to us because we're primarily a webinar. Course approval may be withdrawn for failure to comply with the regulations. Additionally, approved courses cannot be held on the premises of a home inspection office or franchise, ensuring educational independence and preventing conflicts of interest in the training process. Record keeping. Student records. Schools must maintain complete records of each student attendance, grades, and completion evidence for at least 3 years after each course concludes. These records must be available for inspection or audit by the board representatives. Tomorrow, I was going to say this at the end, but I'm going to just say it now. You're going to get your certificate. That certificate is stored by us. If you lose a certificate, just email us, we'll send it to you. But we keep all the certificates. So if anybody needs one, just let me know. There's a form you could fill out. Completion documentation. Upon satisfactory course completion, schools must furnish a certificate or affidavit to the student as presented by the school licensing board, documenting the successful completion. We even started putting the approval codes on those because New York was requiring it. So I just put them all the states on there. So it shows you what the licensing number was from the state. Licensee responsibility. The burden of proof for course completion rests with the licensee. Documentation must be submitted as prescribed by the board to verify continuation compliance. We've only been audited one time since I've been an inspector. It could happen at any time. You don't know. So keep your certificates. They're emailed to you. Put them in a Dropbox. Put them in Google Drive. Print them out. But if all else fails, they were emailed to you. So check your email. And then if that doesn't work, just email us. I'll get you your certificate. Not a problem. Audits and oversight. They can do unannounced visits. Audits assess the delivery methods used by instructors to ensure effective teaching techniques. Content confirmation oversights include confirming that the content being taught matches the approved curriculum and covers all required topics adequately. Auditors may evaluate the student experience to ensure educational quality and compliance with professional standards. Course content requirements, relevant focus. It must be, content must relate to the home inspection principles and practices. Material must include current laws and new developments. Exclude topics. Mechanical, office, and business skills are not approved for credit. And continuing education, 20 hours required every 2 years, including 3 hours on what you're doing right now, the law. The 20 hours should be really easy to get. You just, we have a bunch of courses on there, and you can watch them anytime. You could become a member. So that's what you have to do.
One of the things that you should probably think about, because you guys are offering a bunch of different courses, is even if it doesn't meet state requirements, you can still do coursework for the benefit of home inspectors. And one of the things that has always bothered me is this exclusion about business practices. It doesn't have to carry credit, and it doesn't have to be approved for you to offer a course.
Exactly, but we find that people
Don't
not sort that they're not sort of motivated to come if they're not getting credit.
I understand, but we all know how important some of this stuff is that no one is teaching. We used to do it in meetings.
So one of the things that we're going to be doing, and I know that we're going to be doing this, and I'm not disclosing anything that we weren't going to tell you anyways, is Stan and Scott have come up with the idea of doing sort of like an open session, like a webinar, or an open sort of like, we're going to do 30 minutes, talk about the home inspection industry, answer any questions, talk about stories, see if we can get the young guys coming into these meetings to if they have questions that are not related. So yeah, that's something that we're going to be doing. And we are, have that in the future plans.
It's an aside, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no, it's okay.
that 30 interns is a very telling number. And I get people calling me all the time because I've done a lot of internship supervising. I won't supervise somebody unless they've gone through my school for the pre-licensing, because we do 100 hours. We don't do 40 hours.
Right.
But there's very few people coming into this business. And it's all going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for you guys. It's going to be a problem for all of us because there aren't enough people coming in. And it's partly because it's so hard. Larry Willett wanted everyone to do 100 inspection reports as an intern. I don't see how that's even possible, but that is what he wants as a requirement. So we're working on that. But there's a lot of structure that's all of a sudden come about because of them wanting so much structure in this.
Well, the other thing too is that the state is requiring, if you're an intern, and let's say you're going to do number 11, 12, 13, you have to notify the client. So let's say I'm an intern for you, Steve. I'm your intern. And you said, you know what, Jim, just go out, do number 11 or 12. Steve, you have to call my client and let them know that I'm an intern 48 hours prior.
Yeah, see, I won't let them go out by themselves.
Right. Well, I can tell you that there's no supervisor in Connecticut that's notifying the intern that their client's an intern. So, all right, approved course topics. Approved course topics include law and regulations for home inspection, and then structural systems, foundations, interior, exterior components, fireplaces and chimneys, roof structures, porches, decks, mechanical systems, appliance inspections, heating and cooling systems, plumbing, electrical systems, telecommunication services panels, branch circuits, home inspection documentation, water supply systems, fire protection, pest identification, environmental contaminants. Courses completed prior to the board certification may not qualify for continuing education, and credits cannot be approved for more than once in the same course within a 2-year period. So we cannot have 2 electrical seminars in the same period. Okay, hardship exemptions. The Home Inspection Licensing Board may grant exceptions to continuing education requirements upon showing a bona fide health or individual hardship. This provides flexibility for licensing facing genuine difficulties. Financial considerations, loss of income resulting from license cancellation is specifically excluded. So you can't just say, hey, I'm not making money, so I can't get my education. Request process. Hardship requests must be submitted in writing at least 60 days prior to renewal, including a detailed explanation of why you're having a problem. Qualified examples, exceptions may include individuals serving in the military or those with physical handicaps that can prevent exam participation from course attendance.
Jim, just to add to what you said before, and we've done it, a lot of times we'll do part one roofing and maybe, asphalt, wood roofs, and then we could do flat roll roofing as a part two or another one. We've done it in the past where, maybe there wasn't that same, even electrical. I mean, there's so many things you could talk about electrical that you could do two different seminars or two different, the topics could be different. So it's
Right.
just
You can't duplicate the same course approval.
We had a question about how many inspectors are active in Connecticut. I looked it up. It's 579, and only 355 of those live physically in Connecticut. So you have a lot of cross, Mass, Rhode Island, New York.
Border jumpers.
The problem is those states honor us, but we don't honor them, and that's something that I'd love to see. It's funny. New York, New York are on us, so it's easy for them to come over here, and much more difficult for us to go across the border.
Okay, hearings on school or course refusal, notification process. When the Home Inspection Licensing Board refuses to approve a school, institution, organization, or specific course, or decides to withdraw approval, they must notify the applicant of refusal and the right to request a hearing within 30 days. How that really works is, if I screw up and not doing my job, and that happens every once in a while, I'll just get a letter, I'll just get an email from the state that the course wasn't approved. And they'll tell me why. They'll just say, hey, listen, you didn't put the state standard in, or, we don't like this. And then I just correct it, and then they're approved. Usually it's my fault. Hearing request. If the applicant requests a hearing within 30 days window, the board must provide grounds for refusal. That's never happened. Due process. This process ensures that educational providers receive due process and have an opportunity to address concerns or provide additional information before final determination is made regarding their approval status. Application forms. They're standardized forms that we must use to submit these approvals. Submission requirements. Completed forms must be submitted with all required documentation and fees. These forms are available online for us, and the department physically provides instruction and guidance resources to help applicants complete the forms correctly. Inspector intern requirements. Okay, so this is interesting. Two supervision limit. Maximum number of interns under direct supervision at one site. So you can't have 5 guys at one site. You can intern 5 guys, but you really only want 1 at an inspection, because I don't think you can give good quality education and training without. The 100 inspections are required before they can move on. And here, this is new. This is a 4-year limit. Years maximum to complete the requirements after permit issuance. All home inspector interns must maintain a detailed inspection log from the beginning until completion of their service contract with each supervising inspector. This log serves as official documentation of their training experience. A copy also must be kept by the supervising inspector and must include the client's name, property address, areas inspected, supervision type, inspection dates, and special the supervisor's initial and license number. Interns must notify the department within 10 days of termination of supervision using a prescribed form. If you are thinking, I know we only have a couple more minutes left, but we're good. If you're thinking about training somebody, my suggestion is you really need to interview them. You want them to come out on at least 1 or 2 inspections with you to see if you can work with them. The other thing I ask them are they working? And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, but I can do them on Sundays during football. That's not a problem. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to take you over 4 years to do it. So, you've got to do this a little bit more expedited. So you also have to, make sure that they're able to show up and keep that log, which is very helpful to them. So the other thing that changed too is, and I didn't know this, and if you're training people, once they're an intern, before this 4-year limit, within that 4-year limit, you have to release them. So let's say they complete the 100 inspection. They have 4 years to pass the test to become fully licensed and get their HOI. They could be inspecting. They've completed your 100. You don't even know what they're doing. But guess what? You're still liable for them because they're still an intern under your license. They're not automatically released. The state has changed that. You can go onto the state website, you submit a form, and you say, this is my intern, I'm releasing them. They completed their 100, and the state takes them off of your license. And then they cannot inspect at that time, though. And that's what I tell them. I'm like, listen, if I like them, to be honest with you, I'll give them a little time. But I'm like, listen, you're coming in with your 100. When are you taking your test? Why? Because you're not going to be doing 101 under my license. Or if I feel they're really competent, I'll let them go a little bit. They're like, oh, I'm going on vacation, whatever. I have to come back and take. Fine. Okay. But as a supervisor, anything that they do, you are responsible for. But now the state will allow you to release them. So again, we have the 4-year window. Permits become inactive if requirements aren't met. They have hardship extensions, and pre-December 2020, permanent holders have until December 2024 to apply. Viewing code CT-SOP 5321. If you're watching this as a pre-recorded event. Supervision of inspector interns, direct supervision. So again, we've talked about it for the first 10 inspections. Supervisor accepts legal responsibility for all intern work. Documentation, supervisor must review and certify all intern reports. While performing inspection work, all home inspector interns must be supervised by a licensed inspector. The supervisor inspector is responsible for direct supervision for at least the first 10, meaning that they must be physically present and witness the intern conducting these inspections. Only one intern may be present for the indirect supervision period at any site, and interns cannot supervise other interns for any home inspection. Only one supervised intern may receive credit towards required 100 inspection. So now listen, I had one time, I'm doing an inspection out in East Hampton, and I got a call from the listing agent, the homeowner, my agent, the client, all in one day. Listen, we're doing the home inspection tomorrow. You can't touch anything electrical. Why? Everybody knows there's a problem. There's something with the neutral coming into the house. Eversource is coming out. They're going to fix it, but it's not till the day after. Do not touch anything electrical. We don't care. We'll sign whatever you want, but we'd like you to do the home inspection, just nothing electrical. Fine. My intern shows up. I say, do not touch anything electrical. Okay. I'm like, good. You clear on that? Yep. So he's in the garage. I come to see what he's doing. He's got the sub panel pulled. I'm like, go home. It's like, what? I'm like, do you think a sub panel is not electrical? It's like, well, it's in the garage. I said, nothing electrical. You're not listening. So go home. 40-minute drive for him. He was not too happy. Supervisor responsibilities, legal accountability. The supervising licensing home inspector must accept legal responsibility for all work performed by the intern, including written inspection reports, reviewing reports. So if your intern gets sued and he's under your license, you're getting sued. He's not getting sued, or she's not getting sued. Let's see. Thorough review. Supervisors must review all aspects of the intern inspection reports, review reports, consultant reports, and work products to ensure adequacy. I look at all my intern reports. So here's a good question. The slide says one intern can get credit for a supervised inspection. The previous slide said you could have 2 interns for the inspection. Is it 1 or 2? You can have 2 interns at an inspection, but only one's getting credit. That's why it's not a perfect standard of practice. Just have one intern. I don't know if anybody's ever sent 2 interns to inspection, because if I was an intern, I'd be pretty pissed that another intern was there. I'm paying you for your time. I don't want to have to share it. So documentation and notification requirements, inspection log. We talked about this, that you have to do the address and everything. Record maintenance, a separate copy of each home inspection log completed by each intern must be maintained by the supervisor. Yep. Report copies upon request. Supervisors must provide interns with copies of the inspection reports that the intern prepared as part of their training portfolio. Board notification. Supervisors must sign a notification to the board regarding their supervision of the intern, accepting all responsibilities and duties. Additional supervisor obligations. The supervisor must cooperate with the department regarding all matters and activities. Termination notice. When supervisor ends, the supervisor must notify the department on the prescribed form within 10 days of termination, ensuring proper documentation of the intern's training period. So that's where I was getting at. Like, once they're done with their 100, notify the state, because you have no idea what they're doing after. They do some crazy things, and you don't want to be responsible for that. Client disclosure. At least 48 hours prior to a home inspection, the supervisor must notify the client that the home inspection will be performed by an intern. This ensures transparency and informed consent. I can tell you nobody's doing it, because nobody would hire anybody that is, doing their first 100 inspections if they can hire somebody who's done 4,000. So I don't know how the state is expecting to, supervise this, but that's what you have to do now as a supervisor. Thank you for attending. If you take a look up at the upper right here, this is our law seminar logo. And if you are a member, a full member at $20 a month, you can go to our site. And even if you're not a member and you paid for this course, you can go to our site, go to where it says download logos. It's password protected, but the password's easy. It's Cornerstone. And then you can download the logo. You just sort of copy and paste it to your desktop, or you can just slide it over to your desktop, and then you can put it on your website if you want. And then what we do for all our webinars now is we have every webinar has a logo that shows completion. So,
Jim, just mention what we talked about before.
Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you?
So anybody who is a non-member who's here tonight, first of all, thank you. Happy New Year. If anybody didn't hear me last night, Happy New Year. Thanks for attending our seminar. The 3 of us, have been doing this a long time, and, our goal is to, put out some really good quality education. I'm in contact with a lot of different contractors, different companies that come out and do presentations all the time. And we have a lot stored for you. If you're a non-member, I'm inviting you to attend any one of our upcoming meetings for free. And certainly reach out to Jim, and he will give you the code to actually attend one of those meetings. I think, you can pick whatever you want. You can even, I'd say you could even pick one that's not live, but you're certainly welcome to attend any of our meetings. And we appreciate everybody for coming. Those that are members, thank you for being a member. And those that are hopefully not members yet, we look forward to having you come aboard. We are also looking to do, and I'm an in-person guy. Anybody who knows me from CAHI, the 3 of us, as well as, several others, were the face of CAHI, but, we really ran CAHI for many years. And, I enjoyed it, as well as I enjoy Cornerstone. But we're going to do 4 in-person seminars. The location to be determined. I'm contacting two different people to do an in-person couple-hour seminar. So we certainly would love to see you come to those in-person seminars. And we're looking to do 4 in-person a year.